Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Mang here, and yeah, I had kind of an epiphany today, I guess you might say. Lightning struck my brain while I was at work, and so I've really been kind of thinking about this all day, and I was like, I have to make a video about this, kind of put it out there, see what people think, see if I can get any more ideas or thoughts or blah blah blah. And of course, it's about the topic presented in the title of the video. On the Backs of Gods, the board game. And obviously it wouldn't be called that, it would just be called On the Backs of Gods, which is, in my opinion, it's a pretty, name, it's like a eye-grabbing name. You know, people hear that or see that and they're like, whoa, that's very unique. But okay. So yeah, I don't know what I was really thinking about when it popped into my head. But if you remember, or if you don't, a while back I ran a Kickstarter, and I was very hyped up. I was very excited about this whole project called On the Backs of Gods. It was going to be a role-playing game, and I had kind of developed all the setting, but then I also needed to develop the game, and that was really where I got kind of hung up on. And so the Kickstarter flopped, as we all well know, but what I should have done is just developed the setting and either just made it, I probably should have just made it for Fate or something like that. Made it just a generic setting book, but that doesn't matter because the setting is still here. It still exists. And so I was like, okay. And for the longest time, I've thought about just writing a book based in the setting, something like that, about a youngish character who's part of a board of explorers, or a guild of explorers whose task is to go and explore every single walker that they can find and to report about it in detail. And so that's obviously ripe for adventure. The thing is, I don't really get a huge thrill out of writing. So that's why that never really got started. And so I am really into board games, though. And so then I guess it just suddenly hit me as why don't I make a board game based on the Backs of Gods? And I immediately went to worker placement. And if you don't know, worker placement is more of a Euro mechanic in which you have generally a pretty static board. Just picture a board, and people place workers, little figures, on the board in certain places to get certain rewards or certain benefits. And so if you place it here, you get maybe a certain amount of gold. Or if you place it here, you get a certain amount of this resource. If you place it here, you can do something special. And generally, it's a good thing. And generally, when you place a worker there, one of your workers there, you can't place another worker there. Nobody else can place a worker there. You took it for that turn. And so it's kind of the only interaction then is that kind of take that. It's oh, I took that before you could. That's about the extent of interaction in a lot of worker placement games. Now, obviously, there's exceptions to all these. But that's the basic framework. And it's it's a very Euro mechanic. There's not a whole lot of luck involved, and there's not a whole lot of player interaction, which kind of sums up how Euros go. And so I'm not a huge fan of worker placement games. I kind of like Lords of Waterdeep, but it's pretty simple, and again, it's pretty formulaic. And so I don't know why my mind immediately went to that, but it did, and so I started thinking about it. And so here's my concept that I have right now in my head for this game. The board would be made up of hexes, would be made up of hex-shaped tiles, and these would be fairly large, something like that, And so these each tile would have either just a grassy plain on it, or a forest, or a mountain, or a water area, so on and so forth. There wouldn't be a huge variety to it, and they wouldn't have any special things on it. It would just be kind of basic. And these would be randomized at the start of the game, and you'd set up the board. Maybe the size of the board, how many tiles you use, is based on how many players there are. Probably. And then each player, I'm thinking 3 to 6 at this point. I think that's a good amount. I just don't see it being terribly exciting as a 2-player game, but maybe. I mean, I personally don't really enjoy 2-player games that much, so I can't see it happening, but maybe it could work. Each player would then get handed, randomly, 2 more tiles. And these would be the walkers. These would be the gods in the title. And so each one would be about the same size as one of those land tiles, one of the board tiles. But these would have the name of the walker. They would have some kick-ass art on them, I'm sure. These would probably each have kind of a special effect related to it, which I'll talk about a little bit later. And then each would have a number of places on it where people could put workers. So these would be like the worker placement aspect. And so each of these placements would do kind of a different thing based on the walker that it is. And so this is where theme really, really marries mechanics, which is what I'm really looking for. I'm basically trying to make an Ameritrash worker placement game. And I'm trying to make a very American worker placement game, which I don't know how many there are out there, but I want to do it right. And so I really want theme to be important. And so if you don't know too much about On the Backs of Gods, I mean, I won't go into full detail, but there's basically a number of these giant walkers that are the size of, small states roaming around this countryside. And each walker is very, very unique. Okay, so you'd have one that walks upright. And, the other people live on these walkers. That's where all the towns and the cities in this setting are. They're all on the walkers because the ground is covered with giant, horrible monsters that kill everything. And so people live on these walkers. So you'd have one that walks upright, and people can kind of live on the shoulders and the top of the head and maybe drape down and stuff like that. And so on that one, maybe not a whole lot of resources are really harvested from that walker because there's just not a whole lot of area to do stuff on. But that walker has some other benefits. Like that one, people have constructed a building right over the ear of the walker, and people special high priests go in that building once a month, and they pray directly into the ear to guide them in a certain direction. And so this is the other mechanic. It was at the end of every round, when everything kind of gets reset, each walker would walk in a random direction or move in a random direction. And so this would probably be accomplished by just rolling a die for each walker, because on a hex there's 6 sides, and so you just correspond a 6-sided die. It would be displayed somehow, and so if you rolled a 3, who would walk in that direction, 1 tile. But if you place a worker then on this certain spot, which corresponds just on this walker, just because they have that special building there, and if you put a worker there, you can pray into the walker's ear, and then for that round you can pick which direction he walks, or something like that. Another walker would be Gaia would be, it's very, very, it's covered in forest. It's all forest. And so in the whole setting for the whole thing, Gaia has they have a problem where they have really no ore or no metal or anything like that. They just have the forest. And so they have almost no airships. And so airships are going to be kind of important in the game for going to other walkers and trading and stuff like that. And so for that walker, they would produce a lot of lumber, wood and lumber. That would be very easy to buy or to farm, to harvest from Gaia. But they have almost no ore. So if you want ore, it's tough to get from Gaia, maybe impossible. But if you go there with ore and you want to sell it, if you want to sell it on Gaia, you can get a really good price for it. They'll pay quite a bit. And so you could buy, you could, again, this is all just kind of concept stuff. It's not all worked out how it's going to be done. But you could either, sell them ore just for straight up money, or you could just convert it maybe at a better rate for just pure lumber or something like that. But then there's other walkers that would just produce only ore and no lumber and vice versa, and there'd be all sorts of in between. There's one that flies, and so that one would have like the best airships. So they would have really good airships that could go probably the longest range, and that walker would also probably move like twice every round instead of once. Yeah, so there'd be all sorts of stuff, and I have a huge Google document that has all sorts of all the walkers that I've come up with, and so it wouldn't be that difficult to come up with special spots and things for each one. And so, yeah, so everybody would get at the start of the game two walkers handed to them, and you would go around once, and each person would put a walker on the board wherever they want, and then would go around again, and they'd place the second walker anywhere they want on the board. And then each person would place a headquarters marker on one of the two walkers that they placed down. Yeah. I think it would have to be that, because if it was just any walker, that might be really OP. So I think it would have to be one of the two you've placed down. And so then your headquarters marker, that's where you're basically like stationed. Like that's where you're kind of like the leader of, I guess. And so any of the spots on that walker you can do anytime for free. That's where you are. But if you want to put workers on other walkers, that's where it gets tricky. If the two walkers are right next to each other, then that's no problem. You can just put your workers there. You can trade for free, blah, blah, blah. But depending on how far the other walker is away from the one where your headquarters on, that's where you have to send out like airships. And so depending on like your level of airship technology or something like that, like certain walkers have certain levels of airship technology, and this would be upgradable depending if you put the resources in. You could send out airships like 2 tiles away, or maybe 3 tiles away, or 4 tiles away, so, something crazy like that. And so if you send out airships, again, this is something I'm not sure how I really want to do. I don't know if I want to just be you pay a resource and then boom, you can place it there, or if I want it to be you pay a resource and then next turn you can put it there. To simulate like how the time that it takes to actually send out the airships, like that might be an idea. Because I also want another aspect where there's like players can hire like air pirates, And again, I don't know how this is like I came up with this like 2 hours ago, so this is all just concepts. But I'd like players to be able to hire like air pirates to potentially raid other people's airships, or maybe even other walkers. And I'd like to hire people to be able to hire like saboteurs to like go to other walkers and like blow up their shit. So like boom, you can no longer use that spot, which could be devastating. And so this is where you kind of get the Ameritrash part. Is I really want interactivity between players in this game. And so if you send airships to other players, other walkers, and people are headquarters there, then you can open up trading between players. And so you can do negotiations. So if one player has a lot of ore, certainly you could just go to like Gaia and just sell off all your ore. Or maybe you can get a better deal or some other sort of, I really want to open it up so where if that player really needs ore, maybe you can trade with them and get something better than just money out of it. Maybe they have some, again, I don't know if I want to like put cards in the game, like certain stuff like that. Again, this is all I'm thinking. And so then I really wanted to think about like victory conditions. Like how do people win? How do people win this game? And so a lot of these worker placement games and stuff like that, it's like Lords of Waterdeep, it's just victory points. Certain things give you victory points. It has a timer condition. After a certain number of rounds, whoever has the most victory points wins. That is very, very Euro, and I don't like it. I don't want it. I don't want anything to do with the victory points. So then I was like, okay, how do we do this American style? And that's where I'm kind of tripping up a little bit. I thought about maybe at the start of the game, everybody gets handed like a secret objective. And this is like what they need. And then we could still do like a certain number of rounds and then the game's over. And if you've completed your secret objective, you can win. But then it's like maybe you have multiple winners. And I'm not sure if I want that. So then I guess you could take out the round timer, and whoever completes their secret objective first wins. That's definitely a possibility. But then it's like, okay, what are the secret objectives? And it's like, okay, you could have one where it's like, you have a certain amount of ore. Like if you gather up 40 ore or something like that at one time, you win. But then it's like, okay, if you draw that secret objective, you get that secret objective, and then you draw the walker that produces like the most ore, you're like, and you put your headquarters there, like you don't have to worry about anything else. Like that's just GG. And so it's like, okay, maybe we need like multi-tiered secret objectives, like where you need the most ore and you need to do this and this, where it's like, it's not just that simple. That could be a possibility. And so I'm picturing this as kind of a medium to heavyweight game, like 2 hours or so playtime, maybe. Probably maybe a little less, but somewhere around there. And so I'm not married to the worker placement concept, but I was really trying to, and again, I have not played enough board games in my life to really design a board game, but I'd like to. I think I have the passion, but we'll see. My knowledge is not incredible. And so I was really trying to think of a mechanic in which I really like the headquarter mechanic, where you are based on one walker, and where you can kind of utilize that walker's resources and abilities to pretty much a free extent, but to get to and utilize other walkers, you have to do some work. And so there would be, of course, then, there would be, in a 4-player game, you'd have 4 headquartered walkers, but then you'd have 4 other walkers that are like neutral, that anybody could work on. And so I guess maybe I could have it where people could establish like a sub-headquarters. Like maybe you could take over another walker and you could utilize that stuff for like free without keep sending airships. That could definitely work for neutral stuff. But then I don't think I want the mechanic where you can completely just kick somebody off of another walker. Like I don't think you should really be able to lose your headquarters. What the hell was I talking about? Oh, right. So yeah, I don't know of another really great mechanic other than worker placement that could really let you do that. That doesn't involve some really complicated system or a lot of cards. Like again, I don't know if I want to bring in just like a Fantasy Flight cards thing to it, where it's just like, no, I have this card that does this. Like I don't know if I love that. I want it to be a bit more deterministic than that, but again, this could all change massively. So yeah, that's where I am right now. And so I think I'm going to get started like pretty soon, just coming up with like prototype, like just paper, just paper prototypes of hexes of different walkers that, and I start coming up with their unique power for that walker, that unique ability or drawback or whatever, and their different worker spots, and coming up with the different resources like lumber and ore. That's a no-brainer. And obviously gold, something like currency would be a definite thing, but there should be something more than that. There should be some other resources available. But I have to really think about it. So I thought I'd make this video to kind of just share all that with you guys. And if anybody out there, if you just have any concepts or ideas in general, I'd love to hear them. I'd love to get some feedback, some thoughts. But if you've played some modern board games, especially worker placement games or stuff like that, I'd love to hear some perspectives from you. Ideally, I go through a lot of testing for this game. We really get it worked out, and then we get a prototype made at some point that looks really fancy. I think like artwork would be like secondary to gameplay. Like, only slightly. Like, artwork would be really important for the final product. I really would love it to look great. Because when I did the Kickstarter and I got that one piece of artwork and I was just so in love with it, I would like that, but across the entire game. But if I can get, in the end, a good-looking prototype, Kickstarter would be an option that I would definitely think about. But if I could find a publisher, yeah, that'd be incredible. But hey, we're getting way ahead of ourselves, so there you have it, On the Backs of Gods, the board game. Let me know what you think. Give me some thoughts, some feedback, some criticism, whatever. Tell me if it's stupid. And I'll see you fine folks around.